Hello there. You are listening to KPCA-LP 103.3, Petaluma, California. You are here live with State of the Union with DG the 30-something. And we had a little bit of change of plans. So one of our candidates, Delinda Fisher, she had a last-minute engagement that she had to attend to. So I did want to make sure, though, that those that had questions for her upcoming on the show, please do send them to her, as well as any other candidates that you may have missed or seen. I did want to mention that all of the candidate interviews, some technical difficulties, but now we have all the candidate interviews on my website at domenica.ninja. So you can find everything that I've done so far. And then actually all my radio shows are on there as well. So please check that out if you are interested. So today, instead of the candidate interview, I am going to, myself and my callers are going to be reviewing 3 of the state propositions. We are going to be covering Prop 11, Prop 10, and then Prop 6. I, of course, would have had to spend an entire show on each state proposition to get every angle. So I will say that each speaker is coming from one perspective or the other, but we'll give an objective overview of the proposition from that point of view. I really do encourage, if you're watching this on Facebook, I encourage that you continue the conversation. We're all adults, so please be respectful. I have a high profanity filter on my Facebook, and I will be hiding messages that aren't respectful because I agree with having respectful ongoing conversations and don't really agree with people being rude and standing out. So again, please research all your state propositions. I wish I had the time to go over all of them. You can ask questions. The phones are closed tonight, so please do not call, just so that I can keep the phone lines open to our callers that are going to be calling. However, you can ask questions via email at domayne@me.com or via the Facebook Live if you're watching the Facebook Live. And again, you can always ask questions later and contact the individuals that are talking. So if you have questions of me or trying to be connected with any information actually with a local election, please do contact me, and I've had many people do so. So that is very exciting. We are coming up very quickly to the November election. The state of California is a very voter-friendly state, and so you can in fact register at certain locations up to Election Day. So if you are not registered, you still have plenty of time to register now, but you can actually register up to Election Day, again, at certain locations. So make sure you look up those locations. If you are a absentee voter, the laws were also changed several years ago now, but you can actually mail your ballot up to Election Day as well, as long as it's sent before the polls close, which was a big deal because I've been an absentee voter for a long time, and you used to have to mail it by a certain date, and then if you didn't mail it by that date, you had to drop it off. I also wanted to add that Lyft and Uber are both offering free rides to polling places. So if you know someone, and I believe that's nationally, I'm not 100% sure. I'm sure it's based on availability, but I know for sure in the state of California, they're offering free rides. So if you know someone that might be impeded by transportation in order to vote, there's also several companies that are closing on Election Day in order to allow their employees to vote, but to also ensure that their patrons vote as well. So as you can see nationally, this is a very important year to vote, and a lot of people are going out of their way to make sure people do vote. So please do. Of course, I always encourage people to do their best to make educated choices on their voting, and also realizing that I don't like to default this, but you don't have to vote for everything if you don't quite understand what you're voting for. And you don't have to vote for example, if several people are running for one thing and you only want to vote for one person, then do that. That's more important than, making a lot of haphazard votes. But to the best of your ability, please do vote for as much as you can. I did want to say before our first caller calls in that I will be broadcasting on Election Day, and I'm actually really excited to do it. It's going to be an editorial. I mean, all my shows are editorial, but this is going to be a pretty loose editorial about kind of things I've heard, questions I want to ask, and then I will also be accepting questions in the studio. Again, I won't be making any endorsements. Of course, my opinion always comes through, but I will be opening up the phone lines and the Facebook and email in order to answer questions perhaps people have of me that they've seen over the last 2 months during the candidate interviews, or of the topics that I'm covering during that time. So I'm really excited to do that. And as I've stressed quite a bit, it's an incredibly important time to make sure you're registered and make sure you vote. And actually, I did want to add that you can check the status of your registration, which I think is really important, because some people may think that they're registered, but they don't, perhaps they're not registered in their current location, their current state, their current city. All those things are incredibly important, because if you're not registered within, for example, if you're not registered within the city of Petaluma, you cannot vote for the local Petaluma elections. And I think that that's something that's really important. I know that people really often overlook the local elections as not being that important, but they are incredibly important, and these are the people that affect your daily life quite a bit. So please, please, please make sure that you're registered to vote within the city and county where you reside, so that you can have a say on those elections. And so, again, you can check your registration, your registration status at vote.org. And then you can also, a lesser known fact is, once your absentee ballot is submitted, you can actually check to make sure if it was validated through the Sonoma County Registrar. It'll tell you if it was received or validated or yada, yada, yada. And then there are follow-up measures if for some reason it was sent and there was an error. So you can follow up with the Sonoma County Registrar. You're still able to register for an absentee ballot. I think we're coming in close. If you feel that you perhaps are going to be out of the area, or, whatever the case may be, in order to vote. But again, California has some pretty voter-friendly laws. So make sure that you are involved. I feel like I'm just saying the same thing over and over again, but, there's no more than I can say about please taking the time to vote for at least, what you think is important and who you think is important, if nothing else. So we are getting up to our first caller. The first proposition we're going to talk about is Proposition 11, that addresses emergency personnel. I'm sure you've seen the commercials on TV or online if you're on those things. So I'm not going to get into the specifics of what the proposition addresses, because I will allow our caller to do so. But again, Prop 11 addresses the work time of emergency professionals, as well as some other provisions that would affect their workflow, or their training, and some of those other measures. So I'm really excited. This is my first time doing a show where I have call-in live with people, so bear with me. There might be some minor technical difficulties. I'm hoping for the best. So we should be having a call-in any moment. And then, again, you can ask questions. I won't be able to get to all the questions because we do have such a short amount of time. But I do want to reiterate that you can please continue the conversation on Facebook in a respectful manner, and I am going to be monitoring that, but I also will make sure that the speaker is alerted of the question. If you're not on Facebook, again, please contact me, and I will try to connect you with the speaker. And again, my email is domayne@maberme.com. So if you email me there, I will be able to send your questions along to the right speaker. We will have 3 today, and I am waiting for the first. I'm sure he's going to be prompt. And again, we're covering Prop 11, Prop 10, and then Prop 6. And we have, considering, oh, here he is right now. So I will answer the phone real quick. So for you, we have Nathan Duvardo, which is a Sonoma County paramedic, and I am going to let him come on. Hi there, Nathan. I'm good. I just introduced you. You want to take off?
What was that? You just introduced me?
I did just introduce you, and I'm just going to let you start off with your Prop 11 talk.
Well, hi, my name is Nathan. I'm a paramedic here in Sonoma County, and Dominica asked me to talk about my perspective on Prop 11. So, Prop 11 is a pretty confusing, politically spun proposition, but from my perspective, through everything I've seen, it kind of comes down to 2 major points. And the first one that is probably much more publicly aware and advertised is about what constitutes a lunch break for private sector EMS workers. And so the language talks about a recent legislative piece on private sector security guards getting a meal period that requires them to be on the clock, available, responding to calls, and that if they have that, they sued and said that does not constitute a meal period. And so that was upheld, and basically they're now allowed to take a meal period where they are turning off their radios and not having to respond. And there's some legal opinion out there that private sector EMS workers could utilize similar language in our industry that would basically change what constitutes a meal period. Currently, our meal periods are don't really follow the state mandation for a meal period, and utilizing this language would kind of solidify that. So Prop 11 is basically carving out private sector EMS workers and not allowing us to utilize this 2016 decision for the security guards in our industry. So we wouldn't be allowed to use that language and change kind of the course of our day for meal periods. And I think if that was all that Prop 11 was about, we would agree. We would agree that that is not in the spirit of the profession, that is not in our mandate for job performance, and we provide a critical service to the community, and to turn off our radios and not be reachable in an emergency situation is not what anybody is asking for. But that unfortunately is not where Prop 11 ends. And where Prop 11, the second part of Prop 11, that is where we really are against, is that historically when we do not get a meal period on our break or during our 12-hour day, if we don't get that, our employer allows us to submit for what's called a missed meal period, and then they are supposed to, under union contract, pay us for an hour of extra work and compensate us for that missed pay. And unfortunately, the drafter of this proposition and the sole funder who's contributed almost $22 million, unfortunately does not, in a lot of cases, pay the employees for that missed meal period. And so if Prop 11 were to be put into action and it carves out the private sector EMS workers from putting this legislation in our industry, it also would retroactive go backwards and would wipe out a couple of standing lawsuits against the company. There is one out right now that is estimated that the employees are owed over $100 million in back pay from the company who wrote this proposition, and that this proposition would basically wipe out those lawsuits and prevent us from using any lawsuits. And so to that end, we kind of really do not support Prop 11, and that's what we're really against. Is this is really a sad attempt by a major multi-billion-dollar company to deprive their workers of back pay from the meal period. So that's kind of the synopsis of Proposition 11, and more of its public and then not so public side. Does that kind of help you, Dominica?
It does. And so one of the main situations I've seen from one of the main questions is that and it's kind of backwards to me in my understanding, but it basically says that if Prop 11 is not passed, that you'll have to be waiting for care from EMS workers and that they won't be receiving adequate training. So I'm wondering if you have an answer to that.
Yeah, so there's two pieces to that. Is waiting for care. If you, so that's one line, right? Is that they say, oh, well, if Prop 11 doesn't go through, you'll have to wait for an ambulance. And that is just not accurate at all, for two reasons. One, no paramedic or EMT that I work with is advocating for a scenario that we turn off the radio and are unreachable. All we're wanting is that if we aren't provided these meal periods, we get paid. And so they're basically taking the worst possible scenario, which is we turn off the radios, we're not reachable, and then they use this logical connection that says, well, you would be waiting longer for care. And in reality, there is, for an ambulance company, a private ambulance company, to run 911 service in a county, they have to sign a contract every several years with the county that they're providing service for. And one of the staples in those contracts is response time requirements. And it says you have to be at every 911 call. In this county, it's within 6 minutes and 59 seconds in most cases. And so the company is responsible for putting up enough ambulances to cover that need. And if they don't meet that need on every single call, they pay fines. And then if they drop below a certain percentage for the month, they pay even more fines. And so to the piece that you'll be waiting longer for an ambulance, if you're waiting longer for an ambulance, all it means is that the ambulance company is not putting up enough ambulances to cover the need in the first place. And if they're not doing that, and they're saying that it's because Proposition 11, what they're basically saying is we don't want to give our people a workload that allows them to have a meal period. So we're going to put fewer ambulance on, demand them to run calls, and then, theoretically, like I said, if this all played out the way that they're supposing that it does, you could be waiting longer for ambulances, but nobody's asking for that. So from my view, it's that part of it is just the ambulance company not doing their job as far as putting up enough ambulances. To the other piece that you asked me, Dominica, you had said that I think you talked about training. And so there is some language in this proposition that talks about it'll give added training. I think the two main ones that they're talking about is active shooter training, and then we get access to psychological PTSD, acute stress response kind of stuff. And so here's my answer for that. We already get that. The company that we work for, the biggest company, the company that sponsored this bill, already gives us that. And in fact, we used to get 5 therapists. They actually lowered it to 3. So we've been telling them that that's not enough, and that hasn't changed. And we already get active shooter training all the time. So to me, my logical thought process is that if that's what this was about, better training, they're the largest company around. They have put, millions and millions of dollars into this proposition. If that's what they're worried about, why not just give it to us? Why not just start doing that more than they're doing now? And to me, it's because that this really isn't about the training for them. They had to put that in there to make it sound like there's this big benefit to us. So.
All right, thank you so much. So just because we have a couple minutes left, is there anything you just wanted to say in closing?
So in closing, I think one of the things that's really detrimental and it's very unfortunate to me and about this proposition is that it's being sold that paramedics would rather take a lunch break than respond. And trust me, we don't do this for the money. We don't do this for the fame. There's many, many days that this is a thankless job. And so we do it because we want to, because it's our families, it's our community. Almost everybody I work with lives in Sonoma County. And so nobody is trying to get rich out of this. Nobody is trying to leave someone without an ambulance or to not have somebody available to respond to their emergency. What this really comes down to is just fair workplace environment. And one of the things that for me personally really upsets me about this proposition, in addition to what I've already mentioned, is that really what this is doing is it's a large multi-billion-dollar company who has sponsored a proposition that is really just aimed at creating a law that's preventing citizens from utilizing the legal system to better their workplace, and that and the workplace in this context is adequate meal and lunch periods. And right now, what we do is not even what the state says constitutes a lunch break currently, and we do it happily. We do it because it's our job, and so we just ask that the people who are the voters consider that you've always trusted us. We're always there for you, and we're not trying to steer you wrong on this one. So
do you just want to remind us in the end which way you're voting on this, because sometimes propositions can get a little convoluted?
Absolutely, and this one has gotten very convoluted. So I would ask everybody to support their local EMTs and paramedics in voting no on Proposition 11.
Alrighty, thank you so much for calling in, and thank you so much for your information. Have a good night. Alrighty, so next up we are going to be discussing Prop 10, and we have about 2 minutes. So a little bit about Prop 10. It's most popularly known as the rent control proposition. We're going to hear a little bit more about what exactly that means. But this has been a pretty hot button issue, not only in the state of California, the Greater Bay Area, and then Sonoma County after the fires. But I think it is a general national issue that's been addressed, given the fact that, what was the data that no one on minimum wage in the entire country can afford a 2-bedroom house or apartment or something along those lines, or I think it was 2 people. And so we have someone calling in. So we must have Dave Coury that is coming in. He's a Marin County resident. He's a little bit early, so we'll get him. And here he is. Hi there, Dave. I'm good. How are you? All right, so do you want to just do a quick intro and take off? Alrighty. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Hi, my name is Dave Coury, and I am an affordable and fair housing advocate in Marin. I work with the website Marin Housing Solutions, and I guess we're going to talk about Prop 10.
Yes, we are.
Cool. So these days, local control is development, especially high-density development, to maintain the options and the character of specific neighborhoods and towns. In fact, what Prop 10 does is enhance public, or rather local control. Right now, there is a law called Costa-Hawkins, which restricts the ability of cities and counties to institute rent control. It was passed in '99, and it had a number of specific terms, including that after 1999, no more rent control could be passed for new buildings, that any rent control in effect at that time, for example, if it was passed in 1980, they couldn't move that forward. They couldn't make it more current, and it exempted private homes as well as other things from the possibility statewide of rent control. And so Prop 10 is an effort to repeal Costa-Hawkins, which would allow localities to do as they wanted. In other words, to have local control over rent control. There are a lot of easy studies that show that the impact of rent control is not clear, and it does work as a brake on surging rents during an emergency such as we've been having in the North Bay and in the Bay Area for several years now. That was just made worse by the fires up in Sonoma. So there's a big push to take away the restrictions of Costa-Hawkins and allow towns to pass rent control ordinances. It does not impose anything. It just removes some of the restrictions.
Okay, so just to clarify, for even just for myself, so it is basically just lifting the requirement that, is it cities and counties can make their own decisions?
All jurisdictions.
Okay, so all jurisdictions can make their own decisions about whether they want to institute some sort of controlled. How do you foresee that actually, because I know that we've worked together, so I know that you're really familiar with the governmental systems. How do you foresee, if Proposition is passed, this will actually play out, in communities?
So it's not going to change the politics of the localities. It will, however, force the localities to come out from behind Costa-Hawkins, and they can no longer say their hands are tied. They have to take a position on rent control. They just can't say, we're not allowed to do it. So it will raise the stakes on rent control, and my hope and belief that it will give local advocates for housing security and stability and affordability more power. In the end, I don't think, for example, a place like Marin will be more likely to pass rent control, unfortunately. But at least if they do find that among the various options, including restricting zoning and restricting funding and not accelerating the process of building, they can at least consider rent control under terms that they've set. And so I think it will help on the margin, and it will certainly bring rent control into the forefront of discussions, because right now the landlords like it, and I'm a landlord myself, so I know pretty well. The landlords like it because it provides a level of security that rent control can't be passed. But if it becomes part of the political trade-off around affordable and fair housing, I think that will give advocates a certain amount of additional power. But in the end, I don't think there's going to be a lot more rent control, actually. But it'll help the negotiating process and the advocacy process. And I think on the margins, like in cities that have very few options, they can't really build, and they have a lot of workers that they like to keep in town, and they're losing their diversity. It certainly would be possible. Right now, it's not possible because of the restrictions of cost of housing.
Well, that's actually a really interesting perspective, and I think you kind of touched on it. But one of my questions, too, is, you know, if cities and counties do consider setting a rent control status, who is responsible for assessing what affordable means? Because, you know, one of my major questions is, well, do we freeze in time right now and say in Petaluma that affordable for a studio apartment is $2,000 a month? You know, is that really affordable to most people? Not really, but that's also the standard right now. So I'm just wondering if you have any, and I hear what you're saying about the advocacy realm, but if it were to go through, you know, do you have any ideas about perhaps who would be charged, or you would want to be charged with what's assessing affordable?
That's really important, Dominica. I did a study in Marin, and the median household income is the benchmark for affordability. And basically 80% is considered moderate to low, 60% is extremely low, and 50 and below is, you know, extremely low. Well, it turns out that if you compare the median household income in Marin to the median wage of jobs that are in Marin, the median wage of a job is exactly less than one-half the median household income. Now, some of that is because they're two-income workers, but that just goes to show you that affordability, even at the levels that they measure it, is a high bar for people who work here. And yes, as you go forward, that bar will get even higher as the median household income increases. You've got to realize that median household income, especially in Marin, is not as dependent on wages as it is on investments and rents and all that other stuff. So, and there are a lot of high wage workers in Marin. But what we've done is put ourselves in a position where the people who fill those half the jobs that are under the median wage they can't live here anymore. We're basically developing, or have developed, a plantation or sunset community where people who work here drive in the morning and go away at night. And I don't think that's strong for communities. I think people who live where they work and can vote and take part in schools and the community, I think that makes for a much better place to live.
Do you know those numbers offhand in Marin County, or a ballpark of what is considered the median household income?
No, but they're really easy to look up. You can go on to the Marin Housing Authority website, and they're listed out there as, you know, they're the ones who deal with Section 8, and they set the affordability level. Their percentages of the median household income, or the average median income across rather the area median income, which for Marin includes San Mateo, San Francisco, and Marin.
So I actually just pulled it up. So according to this data I'm looking at, the median household income in Marin County is $91,500, but the average is $133,128. And then there's been a 27% increase since 2000. So just to add those numbers, and I'm in Petaluma, and it is behind, but we're getting there real quick.
You guys have been through a number of insults to your housing stock, and as Marin doesn't take its responsibility, people are moving up there, and so sticker shock in Petaluma is real.
So the other, we all see these commercials on TV that are one way or the other about the propositions, and of course I have my own feelings about that. But one of the major counters to this proposition is that renters are going to be fighting for space. And you've very much touched on the supply issue. So I guess maybe it's, outside of this proposition, do you have any ideas, and perhaps just the North Bay, about how beyond this rent control issue, this space issue can be addressed? Because rent control may not be the entire answer.
It definitely is not the entire answer. We need new affordable housing. And I'm very annoyed by people basically who say, build it over there. And by over there, Marin means Richmond, Antioch, Stockton. And that's not where our workers should live. We shouldn't put that burden on the people who provide our workforce, especially because supporting their local community efforts. They should be able to be volunteers, and instead, by restrictive zoning, in Marin in particular, we have a lot of single-family homes, but not a lot of multifamily homes. And what will make a difference isn't even building more apartment buildings, but what we really need are multifamily, affordable buildings.
Okay, so hate to interrupt, but since we're almost out of time, I just wanted you to reiterate which way you are voting on this proposition.
Hell yes.
All right, thank you so much for your time. Alrighty, so next up, I got surprised in the studio by an in-person versus a call. So next up, we're going to be talking about Proposition 6, and I am here with Petaluma business owner Michael Regan. He's off camera, but I think it's going to be okay. It's going to be just fine.
No, I appreciate you dealing with that, because I just got out of an event, and I figured if I went home with a 6 and a 4-year-old, the phone interview would not go so well. So I figured I would see the miraculous DG, doing her thing in studio. So I'm here. And Melissa, of course. Yes, absolutely.
Alrighty, so just you can get on to it about the proposition.
Yeah, so you want to talk about Prop 6. So essentially Prop 6 is the repeal of the gas tax. So I've been, obviously campaigning for Petaluma City Council I've been campaigning for no on Prop 6 because essentially what Prop 6 did is it upset people because it was a tax increase that was never brought to the public. It was put through the legislature, passed, and a lot of people were upset about that. That again, if you're going to tax us, at least let us have a vote, and talk about it. So that's kind of why it got put on the ballot, was that there were people that were upset that it was not brought to the public. So, this is why we have it. But essentially, it increased the gas tax for the first time since, I believe, 1994. So it's been quite some time that we haven't increased the gas tax. Plus, on top of that, it also added a fee to people who have electric cars. So right now, you have an electric car, you're driving using our roads, but you wouldn't pay any money to maintain the roads because the money comes from the gas tax. So this makes it a little more equitable that everyone who's using it is now paying into the roads getting fixed, and it increased our gas tax. So essentially, like locally, for instance, the gas tax money is being used to pay for 101 widening. So it's costing 101 widening through Petaluma about $85 million. That money is coming from the gas tax. Without the gas tax, you're obviously, it's essentially, you can add 10 years to any project that's out there, because without the money, we're going to lose all that revenue. It's going to take us a long time to rebuild it. So locally, what you're seeing through the gas tax revenue is you're seeing 101 finally get widened through Petaluma. That's a real thing that's happening. If you've driven on 101, you see the digging already starting, the dirt piling, things like that. So that's a real project that's happening. Then beyond that, we've already put $7 million as a city into the Sonoma County Transportation Authority to build the overpass correctly where Rainier will run. So essentially, they're going to build an overpass, kind of like Golf Course and Runner Park. And so we're going to be able to build Rainier right at grade under the freeway. So it's actually making Rainier finally feasible to that. And then also the city's budget is about $5.4 million for road repair. And you're going to lose $1 million if that doesn't pass, because $1 million is from the gas tax. So we'll drop to about 4.4 million. So a lot of the paving you've seen, if you've been downtown, a lot of streets, they're getting paved. Well, a lot of this is
they like to do it all at once.
That is true, but because we got the money all at once, we got the $1 million, and this was the first year the gas tax was in effect. So we finally have got the $1 million. We're doing something with it, and then Prop 69 passed in June, which basically said that the money can only be used for infrastructure projects. So it can't go to the general fund. It can't pay for pensions. It can't do any of that. The money can only be used for infrastructure projects. So there's a safeguard on your money, essentially, that it can only be used for infrastructure. And we're really seeing real world examples of, look, locally, we're seeing a lot of improvement from that gas tax revenue. So if that didn't pass, again, that's going to throw us at least 10 years. So if you thought Rainier was going to take 5-7 years to do, we'll just add another 10 years to that if the gas tax doesn't pass, because obviously we won't have the feasibility won't be there to do any of these projects for quite some time. So that's why I say it's very important to vote no on 6, because again, I'm not a huge fan of taxes, but I understand that at least this makes it equitable when people who have electric cars now pay into the system. And it also, obviously, since the first time since '94, we've increased our taxes. So obviously we've had inflation, and we're seeing real world dollars and real world projects actually happening because of this money that wouldn't happen without it. So it's benefiting us, especially us as a community. It's really benefiting people in Petaluma and in Sonoma County.
So one of the biggest kickbacks, I'll say, or conversations about it, and I want to say I apologize for people that are watching, but I had to reset the microphone since I wasn't ready for someone to be in the studio, and I'm still hearing an echo, but I think we'll be okay. Okay. So I've been talking about this whole period about kind of the commercials that we see, because if you have not seen my show before, I'm very intense about the media and how things are shown to us. So one of the major things that the opposition to the those who would like to repeal is that it's impacting low-income families and heavy drivers, and it's affecting them in a way that is debilitating in order to pay the gas tax.
Well, I would say absolutely it affects everyone. I mean, any kind of tax increase you do, it affects it. But we have to come to the conclusion that this is a real problem. Our infrastructure is a problem, and it's critical to our economic success and our economic development. You have to have good infrastructure, and we have horrible infrastructure. So at some point you have to pay for it. So how do you pay for it? And my thing is that at least people who actually drive and are on the roads are paying for the roads they're using. They're getting the service. They're paying for a service they are getting. At some point, someone has to pay for it. And again, maybe, you can always poke holes in everything, but at the end of the day, the work needs to be done. Someone needs to pay for it. And this case, how does that, this makes perfect sense to me, that the people who use the roads, who use the service, are the ones paying for it. So to me, it's just one of those things. Eventually, you do have to pay for the services you use, and unfortunately, it does make it a little more burdensome. But at the end of the day, if we don't do this, you're not going to be able to drive at all. I mean, our freeways, our roads are deteriorating. We have to do something about it. So at some point, you have to pony up and pay the piper, so to speak. But you've got to do it. I mean, it just needs to be done. Infrastructure is critical to our economic and just our livelihood, our success, period. So you have to do it at some point.
Well, and so this is a question that it's basic, but who is the tax on?
Who's the tax on?
Yeah.
The tax is added to your gas. So whoever buys gasoline and diesel. I mean, yeah.
I only asked that. I asked that because I think that whenever there's a tax, there's a misunderstanding necessarily of who's being taxed in the situation. So it's the consumer that's being taxed.
Well, but the consumer using the gas. So if you don't buy gas, well, if you don't use any kind of transportation, you don't do anything, you just, you're at home, it's truly, then you don't get a tax increase because you're not using gas. You're not using our roads. But if you're using our roads, whether it's electric vehicle or gas-powered vehicle, you are now paying into our roads being fixed. So, again, only the users are being taxed for this.
So this is a pretty cut and dry proposition. So it wasn't as long-winded as the
well,
other ones.
No. I mean, I guess, and to that point real quick, though, about the taxation, everything goes from gas goes into it. So your food prices increase. Everything increases because trucks, it's trucked in, all that kind of stuff. So it does increase the prices somewhat. There's no doubt about it. But again, at the end of the day, what we come down to it is our infrastructure needs the help and someone needs to pay for it. And you can't just, at some point, you got to do something. And this is a way to truly start working and fixing the problem.
So, of course, you said it affects like all aspects of people's lives because, of course, we need gas in order to, and this affects the entire state of California, not just Sonoma County. But and you started with it, and before we end, I wanted you to kind of just reiterate locally, whether it's Sonoma and Marin or surrounding counties, what exactly, as a commuter, I kind of think of the holistic view of having to drive from whether it's the North Bay to San Francisco or the East Bay. So if there's any projects offhand, you mentioned some ones locally, but if there's any other ones in the scope of a commuter that
the other one that's been obviously nothing's been done at this point because they have to see if they have the funding, but part of that is Marin County is going to get a significant chunk of money from this, and one of the things that they have mentioned as a priority is finally getting the Duvardo narrows down to 3 lanes. That is not going to happen without the gas tax money, period. So, because Marin's not, I don't think at least the voters in Marin, and I don't want to speak for them, but I don't know if they're going to be as willing to tax themselves for something they see as more of a benefit to Sonoma County. So it's one of those things where this gas tax money truly helps us all. Because again, we can get our projects locally down Sonoma County, but then Marin County can take that gas tax revenue and then widen the Duvardo narrows. And that is something that we've been told through their transportation authority is a priority for them with the gas tax money. So if we get that, that's going to make a lot of commuters' lives a lot better once that whole Duvardo, basically once you have 3 lanes all the way through, from Windsor all the way down to the bridge, essentially, and more lanes in some cases, that's going to be a huge benefit to commuters. So that's the biggest one I see that we could see coming is that. And then obviously 37 is going to have to be dealt with. That's going to be $1 billion. I mean, that's a ridiculously expensive project because of what they're going to have to do to it. Now it's going to have to be done. So that one I can't speak to in terms of, I don't know if there's even much gas tax revenue to pay for that. There's some private enterprises that I've heard a public-private partnership to do that. Maybe make it into a toll road, so people can actually, who use it, pay for it. But the Duvardo narrows would be the biggest project I could think of outside of Petaluma that we could see done through that gas tax revenue.
I just wanted to point out the parallel between the last talk and this one. We're talking about how with affordable housing, how people commute into Marin County and because they can't afford to live in Marin County. So just a little parallel. I like to draw parallels on my show.
And it'll make the commute easier now.
Yeah.
If that happens.
Don't we all hope it happens? So just in closing, do you have any closing statements? And then just please remind us which way you are voting on this proposition.
So again, vote no on Prop 6. That again, as clearly as I can say, we are seeing this is a tax that I understand some people can be upset about how it was passed, but we're seeing real world action being done from it. It's really helping our lives. 101 widening is huge. If we're able to get Rainier through, that could be huge. another $1 million in our city budget to pay, that can only be used to pay for street repair, infrastructure repair. That's huge. So when you put those together, that gas tax, you're actually getting your money back essentially, and then some from that, because we're seeing real projects built in Petaluma. And then obviously down the road, if we can get Novato Narrows done too, that would be a huge benefit to us in Sonoma County. So just again, from all that we're actually seeing in project shovel ready, it's going to be a huge benefit to us. And so I would encourage everyone to vote no on Prop 6.
All right. Thank you so much for your time and showing up in the studio. I was like surprises. Hi, thanks so much.
Thank you, Dominica.
Alrighty, so we are nearing the end, and I just wanted to reiterate that I will be here on election day doing my show. I will be doing a full editorial type show on really everything I've heard over the last couple months, doing candidate interviews, and then my personal feelings about propositions and all that kind of stuff in between. And so you can catch that, of course, here on my Facebook page. Next week, I will be rounding out my candidate interviews with Teresa Barrett. And so you will be able to hear that again right here, live video, if you're watching that. As I said, and I really do, because I wasn't able to cover every aspect of every issue, on this show as much as I would have liked to, I would have had to spend every single show for 2 months going over all the state propositions. So, but please do continue the conversation respectfully online, or you can contact me and I'll help set you up with people. But as I said, please be respectful with your conversations and be respectful of each other if you do continue the conversation. So again, you can catch me. Of course, this show did not represent my personal opinions or the opinions of PCA, KPCA, or its members. So, but I do want to thank everyone so much for being here. And again, so my next show, let me give you the exact dates because I'm a dates person. Let's see where we are right here. All right, I'm still hearing echoes in my mind, but this is how we deal with community radio. All right, so on November 30th, I will be here with Teresa Barrett at 7 p.m. And again, that show will be open to full questions. So we'll also have the call-in questions again. As you can see, I couldn't clog up the phone today. And then on the 6th, you will get me on my own from 7 to 8. And again, you will be able to ask questions via email, phone, and on Facebook. So please tune in because I would love questions. I've been doing all these candidate interviews and this show. And so I would love if people have questions at that point. If you still do, I surely hope you have voted by 7 p.m. But if you haven't, or if you want to listen on the way to the polls, you can do that too, because you can vote in the state of California till 8 p.m. So find your polling place. And as I started the show, like I said, please check your registration status or at vote.org. You can check your status and make sure that you're registered to vote in your city or county, or that you're registered at all. Sometimes things happen. Sometimes a box doesn't get checked when you move. Things do happen, so please check your status there. And if you aren't registered, you can still register. And if you aren't registered as an absentee, but you'd like to register an absentee, you can still do that as well. So refer to the Sonoma County Registrar's website to make sure that all gets taken care of. I don't think we have any final questions for yours truly. So I think I've said everything I wanted to say. So thank you again for everyone that called in. Thank you. I'm so glad that everything went off without a hitch, because I've never answered the phones here before. And I do actually want to give a plug really quickly, because we are growing so much as a radio station. We just had our members meeting and our elections, and this is such an amazing resource, as you can see, to the city of Petaluma. And really, I reach people in other states, and because you can live stream and on Facebook. So this is really an amazing tool for people to reach their communities. And when I was at our annual event, I talked about how I felt that maintenance of democracy was dependent on these kind of things where individuals in their communities can have a platform to speak about how they feel, whether it's, whether you agree or not. And sometimes how you feel is through music, sometimes it's through talk. But, I think that that's a really important way. And so supporting your local radio stations like this, whether it's becoming a member, whether it's becoming a supporting member, whether it's becoming a donor, all these things are really important to make sure that that local voice and that local democracy is maintained. So please do. And if you want to find any ways to contribute, I am plugging, but we're all here. I'm a volunteer. Everything you've seen around me for all these shows has been based on, certain contracts and donors. So please get involved, because without our donors and contracts, none of this would be possible. I wouldn't be sitting here in this state-of-the-art studio, which when you listen to on the radio, I feel has better sound than a lot of the other commercial radio stations around. So anyway, again, thank you so much for tuning in. You are listening to State of the Union with DG the 30-something. And you are listening to KPCA LP 103.3 in Petaluma, California. And we will see you soon.